Here we are. We're already at week 4, rediscovering the good life. Everybody wants a good life. Everybody wants to achieve the goals and objectives that we dream about even from our childhood. We all have a mental image of a good life. We know what we want, and we're told from the very beginning, at least in most part, to take charge, to be in control, to grab for it. That's the good life. And it's so pervasive in our culture that the good life is about a family, which is very basic and very good. It's also about the home and the automobiles. It's about the job. It's about the wardrobe. It's about the house in the mountains or at the beach. It's about all the wonderful things that are available to us in our society. These are things that we look forward to, and we want to be secure as well. We're told that it's important in the good life to have good health care. And who wouldn't want good health care? We want good transportation. We want to have everything just where it should be and be properly insured, so that if we do die, which we don't like to talk about very much, but when that happens, that those we leave behind will have it all set for them, and they won't have any undue burdens. Now, actually, there's nothing inherently wrong with wanting peace and security and nice things. That's pretty human. But the good life is not what our culture says it is, because there are people that I've met, some of the happiest people I've ever known, are people who live in poverty. Now, I don't recommend poverty. I don't think that poverty is good for those people, essentially, but that they've been happy and contented and have lived a very good life. In fact, oftentimes much happier than those of us in this country or in the Western community of countries who have it so well economically. So the good life, though, was, I think, described by Jesus. And it was his kingdom manifesto, the Sermon on the Mount. The most radical statement, I think, ever penned, ever put on paper, or papyri, I suppose, in that case, and then with the advent of the printing press on paper, this marvelous 3 chapters of Matthew, chapter 5, 6, and 7. And in it, he describes what we call the Beatitudes. That, in other words, have this attitude in life. The most radical act of the Christian is to read the words of Jesus and believe them and do them. Soren Kierkegaard, a well-known philosopher, had lived in the 1800s. Another man who lived a short life, only 43 years. But Kierkegaard was he was very eccentric. He was a citizen of Denmark. He's been known as the melancholy Dane. He used to walk the streets and teach his philosophy to his friends and have conversations with them in coffee shops, and he spent a lot of time writing. And he was a person who really challenged the Danish church to practice what they preached. And he wrote about theology, and he was rather an iconoclastic man, a man who would smash things, a man who sort of enjoyed controversy. And in his controversial statements, one of the things he said was that theology was a creation of man to protect us from the Bible. Now, I've always liked that. A little bit of edge to him. But what he was trying to say is that oftentimes we read the Bible, and what we do is we take our theology and lay it over the pages of the Bible, and then we strain out what we really like, or what our theology permits us to believe. There are things in the Sermon on the Mount that are so radical that sometimes they are hard to believe, like turn the other cheek. I mean, the golden rule, all these kinds of things that we say, well, we can't really responsibly, in reality, live that way in this life. What about protecting ourselves? And we get into really interesting conversations about the whole thing. But Kierkegaard went on to say that it's a frightening thing to fall into the hands of the Almighty God, but it's equally frightening for a Christian to find themselves alone with the Bible. Now, what he meant by that was without somebody telling us which parts aren't true, or which parts really can't reasonably be applied to our lives now, considering the conditions we're living in. But that's when it comes to the Beatitudes. That blessed state. He says, blessed are those. Now that means that's the good life. The blessed life. The life that God prescribes. The life that He has orchestrated for us to live. It tells us to recognize our need for God and to work for peace in the Beatitudes. And it tells us to even be happy when we're persecuted for the name of Christ. Now that is the good life, but it's also a tough life in some cases. In other ways, the Christian life is an easy life. He talks about salt, Christians being salt that preserves, about the church and our lives being a city set on a hill, a shining city on a hill that everybody can see as an example. He talks about anger, adultery, divorce, keeping your promises, revenge, loving your enemies, giving, praying, money, anxiety, and he ends with what the nature of faith is. And he says that a man who hears my words and does them is the wise man. He's like the man who builds his house on the rock. And when the storms come, and when the winds blow, that the house stands. But if we just hear his words and don't do them, then we're like the man who built his house on the sand. And when the storm came, of course, the house is obliterated. So Jesus tells us that a person of faith who lives the good life is one who hears his teaching and does it.